Hello everyone, my name is Steve Bannerman and this video is about the Rosetta Salt article on the CloudDoc project, which you should be able to see the CloudDoc website on the left hand side of your screen. And if you click on this Rosetta Salt article, actually if you read a little bit about what this Rosetta Salt project is about, it's how to deploy your own password manager to the AWS. And there's actually a third part of that article about the React Native mobile client. So if I click on that Rosetta Salt article, scroll past the executive summary and show you there's first section is on a serverless server, second section is on the React browser client, and the third section is on the React Native mobile client. And that React Native mobile client is really the context for this complimentary video. There's a lot of written description in the article, but this video is meant to show you how to use a number of tools in order to eventually to publish this React Native mobile client in the Expo environment in order for others to be able to consume that application, criticize it, hopefully constructively, make it better, and then once that has completed its course, then you'll be able to publish it in the normal app stores, the Apple App Store and the Google App Store. Okay, so that's the context for this video, how to take this React Native client for Rosetta Salt and deploy it into that Expo environment, both for your own use as you develop it and also for others to consume, to criticize, and to make better. Okay, so if you change your focus up to the upper right hand corner, I've got this set of things that I want to accomplish for us during the video. Section A, Section B, Section C. Section A is setting up the software platform. Section B, installing and using the Expo framework. And then Section C is really just publishing the Expo project into the Expo environment and making that available. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to everybody. So we're going to start with Section A, of course, and try and get a software platform set up. Now before I do that, just you can do this, set up this Expo framework on your own machine. If you have a Cygwin environment or a Windows subsystem for Linux environment, that'd be easier than doing it for Windows. Actually, I'm not even positive if you can do it for Windows, but it'd be easier to do that locally. However, I have on occasion had some, surprisingly enough, some network problems on my Windows machine related to setting up the Expo framework in Windows subsystem for Linux. So because of that, and also just to make it more broadly applicable, I'm going to go ahead and do this in an Amazon or an AWS Linux machine, just so I can start from scratch, show you all the steps, and you'd be able to do the same thing and repeat it for yourself if you need to. Okay, so that's a good place to carry on from. We're going to now just take a look at, in AWS, there are a number of choices for their Amazon Linux. This is the version of Amazon Linux that I'm choosing. If you notice here, it is free tier eligible. However, for this particular video, I'm not going to use a free tier eligible machine because of what we're going to be doing. If you look at the top right hand corner, Section A, you see that we're going to be installing NVM, Node, and Yarn. And occasionally in the past with different projects, I've seen those tool sets or those tool chains have trouble running on a machine that only has 1 vCPU or 1 gigabyte of memory. So I'm going to actually, I've already started up a machine so as to not waste your time, but this is the type of machine I've started, and with 4 vCPUs and 16 gig of memory. Okay, so let me shift attention to the bottom right, and we're going to go ahead and SCP a file into that machine. I haven't done anything on the machine yet. I'm just going to put that up there for later. That Rosetta Mobile TGZ file, that's the Rosetta Mobile React Native application. And then I'm going to SSH into that machine. And you can see we're greeted with the need to run this sudo yum update. So I'll go ahead and run that. It doesn't normally take too long, so I won't pause the video. But I will interject here and let you know that occasionally some of these things are going to take a few minutes, maybe a minute or two, sometimes 3 or 4 minutes. So I will occasionally pause the video so as to not waste your time. Okay, this should be done momentarily. And if we look in the top right hand corner, what is it we're going to do next? We're going to install Node Version Manager NVM. And the reason we might want to do that is so that we occasionally might want to have multiple versions of Node running on the machine. So if we shift back to the browser, I've got a page open for installing and updating NVM. So I'm just going to install it this way with curl and bash. It's going to load an install script and then run it with bash. That normally doesn't take too long. Yeah, it's done already. And I won't bore you with the details, but you can try that yourself or read it yourself on the screen here if you want to pause it. But basically it says we can do a few things, or we can exit, come back in. So I'll go ahead and take that option. It's a little bit faster. Now I can see that I have NVM available to me. So step 3, up here, once I've got NVM installed, I want to use it to install Node and NPM. So the first thing I need to do is list the remote versions of Node that are available to me. So I'm going to run NVM ls remote, and when I do that, towards the bottom I can see the currently released version, so I want to install that. And I'm going to pause here because, I thought that might take a minute, but done already, so that's wonderful. I will, however, point out something that's also in the plan. I've got man path in parentheses. And so I was going to take just a minute or two to try and correct that for us, just to have a clean platform. So you can see that it can't set the locale. Make sure these different environment variables are set. And so if I type locale, you can see that it's set to a value c.utf-8. And if I run locale -a and grep for en_US, I can see here are the 4 choices, but actually none of those match what's up here. And I suppose if I grep again and see UTF-8 or grep for UTF-8, you can see that I don't actually get any results for that. So actually back up here you see that man path resulted in an error. So let me just run man path. You can see that you get that same error. So the way I'm going to address that is I'm going to add a couple of lines at the bottom of my bash RC file. So I'm going to copy and paste those in. I've got them in my editor elsewhere. I'm going to paste those in. And I guess take note here, these lines that I'm going to highlight, these are placed in place when NVM is installed. Okay, so we're just going to follow that up with a couple of environment variables sets through the export command. And I'm just going to go ahead and exit and come back in. And I want to show you a couple of things. First of all, the man path variable is still presented to us. However, if I run man path manually, I see that I don't have the error anymore. So first off, that man path error that we're seeing when we log in is probably something that's happening in the context of the login itself. But once we get to the bash RC, set those environment variables, we've fixed things. So if you ignore that error during the login, I think we're in good shape. And if I show you the environment and grep for LC, you can see that that variable is set. Those variables are set. Okay, so probably non-necessary, like there may not have caused problems, but I thought it would take a minute or two and fix that, get the platform in good shape before we continue. Okay, so in the upper right hand corner we've got Node and npm installed, and let me just show you the version of each that's installed. You can see that they are in fact installed, and so our next task is going to be installing Yarn. So if you highlight, or sorry, move your focus to the browser again, I've got this page on the Yarn installation selected, and I did want to take a moment and explain something to you in case it's interesting. Excuse me. So the AWS Linux, because it uses the Yum package manager, is more like this CentOS, Fedora, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So I could use sudo yum install yarn. However, when I did that in practicing for this video, it also installed the Node.js package. And I was thinking that that wasn't ideal. I didn't really want to have nvm install a version of Node and then yum install another version of Node.js. I didn't want to have those competing versions in place. Wanted to use Node Version Manager to manage that for me. So in looking at the Debian Ubuntu page for installing Yarn, it shows the ability to use apt to install it, package manager apt to install it, but it allows you to use the no install recommends, and the recommend has to do with Node and Node.js. Could not find anything like that for this version, so I opted not to use this yum install yarn, and instead chose to use the alternatives and use this installation script. Okay, so I'm going to copy that, and before I run it, I want to show you that yarn is not currently installed. I'm going to again download a script, use bash to execute that script and install yarn. We've got some stuff at the bottom here, much like when we installed nvm, but rather than do any of that, I'm going to exit, re-enter, and now when I run yarn I can see that I have it installed. Okay, so we'll take a breather. Now we've completed, in the upper right hand corner, we've completed setting up the software platform, and we're now prepared to move on to installing and using the Expo framework. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move on and do that, and in the browser I'm going to just show you why we're installing the Expo framework to begin with. If you look at setting up the development environment for React Native, you can see that they say that you should go ahead and do that if you're new to mobile development. That's the easiest way to get started. So that's the justification for doing it. And then if we move on to this expo.io site, it tells us how to do a quick start. I'm just going to follow that set of instructions. So I'm going to make a directory called work, change into that directory, and then I'm going to install the Expo command line interface. And after I start this, I will pause it just in case it takes a little bit of time. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So here I'm going to go ahead. Okay, we're back, and just to give you an idea of how long that took, it was about a minute or two. So that's the sort of time frame you could expect if you do that yourself. Okay, so we've now installed Expo, and if we go back to the browser and take a look at the next step, it's initializing a new project. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and that corresponds to step 2 in section B in the upper right hand corner. This is creating our seed project, and I'm going to pause after I start this just in case it takes a bit of time as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start that. Did want to highlight that it's using the Yarn package manager rather than npm to install it, which should be faster. So pausing now. Okay, we're back, and to give you an idea how long that took, it was a minute or two before it completed. And some of these things might take longer if you're running them outside of an AWS environment. Just to be aware of that. Okay, so we're now inside of this new project, and I didn't highlight it, but I will now. The directions were to cd there, and then use yarn start to run the project. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and while it's starting up, I want to explain what's going on here. So the Expo Yarn is running the Expo command line environment, which is starting up a server, and it's starting up the server on this IP address and port. And this QR code that you see in front of you allows you to use the Expo application on your Android devices, just the camera app on your iPhone devices, iOS devices, and to actually launch the application, the mobile application, on your phone or your tablet or whatever the case may be. So I can't do that right now, and the reason is this IP address. Okay, that's an internal IP address for this AWS machine, but I can do it. I just need to stop and then restart the Expo server with a different command line. So let me go ahead and copy that. I've got it in my editor, and so what I'm doing is passing in this React Native packager hostname environment variable when I'm starting with Yarn, and then just double check that IP address that is correct. Now when I start like that, it's going to go through and do the same thing. However, it's going to bind the server to this IP address and port. Okay. The other thing I have to do in order to actually load that onto my phone is I need to open up at least port 19,000, and I guess what I've witnessed with the Expo framework is that it will sometimes use other ports near 19,000. So on my security group for this AWS EC2 instance, I opened up ports 19,000 through 19,020 for my particular IP address. And so I'm allowing my phone to get to that IP address and port. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here, and actually, sorry, I'm going to need to scroll back up and use my phone to scan that QR code, and now you can see below that the server is giving us some output telling us that it's building the JavaScript bundle. I'm going to pause actually because it may take a minute or two. Okay, so we're back, took less than a minute, and now what I see on my phone is, that basically the hello world screen, and what it says is open up the code for this screen in screens/homescreen.js, change any of the text, save the file, and your app will automatically reload. So I'm not going to do that because you really won't be able to see it on my phone, but take my word for it. Take the word from those from expo.io for it. It does work, and it's really meant to allow you to make changes and rapid changes, get rapid feedback with respect to the changes on your mobile app, but running on an actual device rather than on an emulator. Okay, so I won't go through that process with you right now. Instead, if we look back at section B, I've done that with the seed project. Now what I want to do is go through that same process with the Rosetta Salt project that I uploaded to the temp directory earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and extract that file, cd to Rosetta Mobile, and we can see that we've got a number of files in there, but maybe what you notice if you're an experienced developer is there's no node modules directory. So I'm going to run yarn install to install the necessary dependencies, and I'm going to pause the video while I do that because it I think typically takes a minute or two, maybe as many as 5 to do that. So I'll get that started and I'll pause. Okay, we're back again, and even though it says it only took 24 seconds, I think it was actually a little bit longer than that, but less than a minute anyhow. Okay, so now I'm really ready to do the same sort of thing. So let me use the same command I used previously with the same IP address. I'm going to run yarn start with this project, and then I will use that QR code with the Expo app on my Android phone. I'll scan it. You can see now that the local server is now building the JavaScript bundle for it. And I'm going to pause again in case that takes some time. Okay, we're back, and that took about a minute or two before it actually loaded on my phone. And just so you know, what's showing on my phone is the Amplifi framework components for authentication. I describe it on the Cloud Doc article, but basically using the Amplifi components to do the first phase of authentication, and I see those on my screen now. Okay, unfortunately I'm not sure how to show you what's actually on my phone, so just have to take my word for it. Okay, so now our final step, if we take a look back in the upper right hand corner, we've now gotten through sections A and B, and now we're ready to publish this Expo application. Alright, I'm just going to pause the video right now, and I'll be back in a minute, get my Expo environment ready to show you that I don't currently have anything published in Expo, and then the goal for this next section is to show you that what I've just put here in the Rosetta mobile space, that we can go ahead and publish that. So bear with me a moment. Okay, we're back, and if you take a look at the browser, you can see that I've got a page open to my particular environment in the Expo framework or service. You can see that I don't have any projects published, and if I refresh that, I still don't have any. Let me go back a second and take a look at this Expo.io docs, and under this publishing section it tells us how to publish. So very simply, I just have to run expo publish. So I'm going to do that, and when I do that, I'm going to need to authenticate. So I'm going to log into an existing Expo account. Bear with me a moment, I need to go and get my password. And paste it in. Okay, this process does take a few minutes normally, so I'm going to pause once more and I'll be back once it's done. Okay, we're back now, and if you add up all the times here in the console output, you can see that it's somewhere between 200 and 250 seconds, which is somewhere between 3 and 4 minutes to actually go ahead and publish that application. Okay, so come over here now, and hopefully if I do a refresh, I'll actually see that application. I do, and now if I click on that, I can see a QR code on the browser, although I may have to scroll up so that you can see it. So now with my mobile app, go ahead and scan that, and whereas it normally would take somewhere between half a minute and a minute to load the application, when I was running the Expo server on that Amazon Linux machine, it took about 4 or 5 seconds for the application to load on my phone this time. So presumably it's already pre-built and available for everybody. Okay, now if we look at what we were planning to do in the video, that was really the last step. So why, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but why would it be useful to publish through this Expo service? And the answer is that it gives availability of the app to other people, potentially beta testers, other people in the application, to see the current state of the application, that sort of thing. And you don't have to use that. You can go direct to the app stores with Google and Apple, but it's a possibility that you might like to do this. It does have a shorter and easier feedback window as far as deploying new versions, particularly when compared with the Apple Store. So I have found it useful. I found the Expo server useful in development, where I'm making changes and seeing how they look myself. And then I've also found it useful to share the app with others, let them have a look at it, make suggestions. And that second part is done through this Expo service. Alright, well, we've now completed the video. I hope you found it useful. And again, if I circle back and remind you what we're trying to accomplish back on this Cloud Doc website, you can see this Rosetta Salt article. Inside of that Rosetta Salt article, it describes 3 main things: the Python serverless server, the React browser client, and the React native mobile client. And the React native mobile client was really the subject of this video. The video is meant to complement what is written there, and in case you wanted to put together a mobile client for your own password manager, what's written there and what's in this video should help you to do so. So certainly I'm available if you have any questions about what I've done here, what I've written, or what I've done in the video, but hopefully it makes sense for the most part. So thanks very much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.